So online lately, I've been seeing a lot of discussion about how our preconceived notions of how people looked in the distant past affects how we view that past, and how these preconceptions color our understanding of how people dressed and looked in the medieval and early modern period. And one of the things I've been seeing pop up over and over again is the idea that while the Protestants might have dressed in drab colors in the early modern period, medieval and early modern Catholics certainly did not. And I'm not a dress historian and I'm not an art historian, but I am curious about art and history and dress, and I want to see if I can take some portraits of people from the early modern period, from the 16th and 17th century, and sort them based on whether they're Protestant or Catholic, based on whether they're wearing bright or drab colors. So I've got 10 pictures here, 5 Protestant and 5 Catholic, and I'm going to try to sort them, and I would like you to sort them with me. After about a minute, I'm going to stop, and then I will sort them for us. You ready to see how you did? Okay. This is Cosimo de' Medici, head of the Medici family and de facto ruler of Florence. He was heavily involved in papal politics, and in fact, several of his descendants became pope. He is Catholic. This is the wedding portrait of Fantia von Stankista, who was a Mennonite and married a potash merchant. As Mennonites, she and her husband would have kept to Mennonite standards of plain dress. So this one is definitely a Protestant. This is a Renaissance painting with unknown subject that may or may not have been painted by Raphael. It was painted in roughly 1518, which is before the Diet of Worms, which means that it's before the Protestant Reformation, and therefore the sitter is Catholic. This is a portrait of Edward VI, King of England, son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, and the son that he tore England out of the Catholic Church in order to have. He is a Protestant. In fact, he's a pretty committed Protestant. He's very, very Protestant. This is a portrait of Catherine de' Medici, the Italian Queen of France, who is notorious for the part she played in the slaughter of the French Huguenots in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. She is Catholic. This is a portrait of Elizabeth I, Queen of England, daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, who was a Protestant. This is a portrait of Oliver Cromwell, Puritan leader of the Parliamentarian Army against Charles I, and later Lord Protector of the British Isles. When he was in Ireland, he committed several massacres against Catholics and was all around a really nasty fellow. Piece of trivia, though, he did allow the Jews back into England after they had been expelled in the Middle Ages, which is a tiny point in his favor. He did this because he wanted England to become the new Jerusalem, and for this to usher in the end times and for all of the Jews to either convert to Christianity or die, but we take what we can get. He is a Protestant. This is Sir Thomas More, I love this portrait because at first he looks like he's wearing somewhat plain and dark clothing, and then you notice that his sleeves are made out of bright red velvet. Sir Thomas More is in fact a Catholic saint, and he is rocking those bright red sleeves. This is Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII, who he famously divorced to marry Anne Boleyn, and, since this was not allowed by the Pope, removed England from the Catholic Church, thus beginning the English Reformation. She was previously married to his brother, Prince Arthur, who died, and though she insisted the union was unconsummated, Henry believed that this made their marriage incestuous. She is Catholic. This is John Winthrop, who was a leading member of the Massachusetts Bay Colony and who articulated a mission statement for the colony in which they would be a shining city on a hill. Thus, a reference to Jerusalem, making it a New Jerusalem. He was a Puritan and thereby a Protestant. Well, look at that. Now that I have rearranged it so that the Catholics are on the top and the Protestants are on the bottom, you can see that all of the Catholics are wearing fairly bright colors and the Protestants are wearing fairly muted colors. Well, look at that. It looks like the internet is right for once. Case closed. You know what? I have 10 more pictures, and I would like to see if we can do it again now that we have achieved a certain level of expertise in this matter. Let's go. Are you ready to see if the rule holds true a second time? By the way, if you've guessed what I'm doing, you get absolutely 0 points. I am not hiding it. This is Charles, or Carlos, VI of Spain. In this portrait, you can see the beginnings of the Habsburg jaw for which his family would eventually become infamous. Spain at the time were known for being the most extra of all the Catholics, and as King of Spain, it is safe to assume that Charles VI was very much Catholic. This is a portrait of Robert Dudley, a courtier to Elizabeth I. He was in fact a royal favorite, and after his wife's death, it was possible that he hoped to marry Elizabeth, though his wife's death was under suspicious circumstances, and many people believed that he had in fact murdered her so that he might marry the Queen. Many years later, he did remarry, and the Queen was so furious that she banished his new wife from court. Robert Dudley not only was Protestant, but he had strong Puritan leanings. This is Mary, Queen of Scots. After her own failed rule, she was forced to flee Scotland, and she came to England, where she began to conspire with various Catholic conspirators in order to topple Elizabeth I and place herself on her cousin's throne. This was unsuccessful, she was caught, and ultimately she was executed for this. She is Catholic. This is a portrait of an unknown Spanish nobleman, painted in the very, very early part of the 17th century. Given the timing and the fact that the individual was Spanish, although we don't know who the sitter was, it is safe to assume that the sitter was Catholic. This is a famous, or perhaps notorious, portrait of Anne of Cleves, the fourth wife of Henry VIII. Hans Holbein painted this portrait to show Henry VIII what his potential future wife might look like, and Henry VIII was so enamored of this portrait that he decided to marry her. However, when she arrived in England, Henry VIII was not pleased with what he saw, and stated that she was ugly and smelled bad and looked nothing like her portrait. Anne of Cleves was the princess of a Protestant court, in fact, a very conservative Protestant court, and this portrait was painted to show her off as the perfect Protestant princess. This is also Edward VI, the same fervent Protestant son of Henry VIII. And indeed, in this picture, you can see that he and his portrait painters were doing their very best to imitate Henry VIII's portraiture, which looks very strange given Edward VI's extreme youth. This is Mary I of England, daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. She was an extremely committed Catholic who tried to undo the English Reformation. In fact, she tried to roll back the clock to before her father had divorced her mother. She was not particularly successful in these endeavors, though she might have been more so if she had managed to produce an heir. Instead, she had some sort of gynecological problem, probably cancer, that ultimately killed her. She was Catholic. This is Eric XIV of Sweden. I'm very sorry for the way I've cropped this particular portrait, since in the original you can see that it very much looks like he has bare legs, proving that flesh tone stockings are not an invention of the modern era. This portrait was sent to Queen Elizabeth I as part of marriage negotiations. He is a Lutheran Protestant. This is a portrait of the Marchioness of Northampton during Queen Elizabeth's reign. She was a close associate of Queen Elizabeth, and her clothing is redolent with symbols expressing this close association and her loyalty to the Queen. She was born in Sweden and was a Protestant. This is Christina, monarch of Sweden. Because of Christina's gender-ambiguous mode of dressing and presenting, I am reluctant to apply any pronouns at all to this individual. Various modern authors have speculated that Christina might have been lesbian, intersex, or non-binary. Under Christina's rule, Stockholm was known as the Athens of the North because of Christina's tremendous patronage of art and learning. Christina was raised Lutheran, however, after abdicating the Swedish throne at age 28, Christina retired to Rome, converted to Roman Catholicism, and became the darling of the Counter-Reformation. Once again, I have put all of the Catholics on the top and all of the Protestants on the bottom. And what is this? This time, all of the Protestants are brightly dressed and the Catholics are in dull, dull shades of black. Well, how the turntables. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Yo-Yo. This is Yo-Yo. He is my baby. He is a 15-year-old Maltese-Italian Greyhound mix. And yesterday he fell off the couch, so he's feeling especially delicate. He always wants to sit on my lap, but today he's being particularly insistent, so he's going to sit on my lap today and join us. Anyway, this is Yo-Yo. Everybody say hi to Yo-Yo. So what did we learn from this little exercise? Well, hopefully you've learned that it's a lot more complicated than plain Protestants and colorful Catholics. You may also have picked up on the fact that a disproportionate number of my plain Catholic pictures were from people who were either Spanish influenced or Spanish themselves. Also, 3 of them were queens, but so anyway, that's significant because the Spanish always had a more muted color palette than much of the rest of Europe. In fact, we can trace the influence of Spanish power by the color palettes of the courts that they had influence over. They would become much more muted as Spanish influence spread. We can see this in the court of Burgundy, for example. The Spanish also discovered something in the New World, and this was logwood black dye, which is a color-fast black dye. Prior to this, black dyes were not color fast, and actually black was not achieved through black dye. It was achieved through over-dyeing multiple different colors, and that this was not color fast at all and would end up fading as time went by to browns and grays and various colors that were used in the dyeing mix. So when the Spanish discovered this black dye, it didn't cause their love for black colors, but it did allow them to live their best goth dreams, which already existed. The Spanish were very, very into the black and the goth. You should see what they did with Baroque art. Spanish Baroque is sometimes downright disturbing. So why do we have this picture of colorful Catholics and dull Protestants? Well, part of it's timing. A lot of our early Protestant art comes from the 17th century, which is when color-fast black dye began to be imported from the New World by the Spanish and the Portuguese. And everybody was like, wow, this is great stuff. We can totally use this color-fast black dye now. And it became the new hotness. So a lot of our early Protestant art involves people wearing black. This isn't because they were Protestant, though actually sometimes it was. Sometimes it was because they were into the plain dress and their idea of plain dress involved black and white. But I'm very skeptical of that for the time, because if you're plain dressing in black, you're spending a lot of money to do that. So they were being ostentatious while also being plainly dressed. The other reason is that our Catholic art both was earlier and also is heavily influenced by the Italian Renaissance. We look at a lot of Italian Renaissance stuff and go, oh, that's what Catholic looks like. And the Italians were doing a lot of trade with the East through their city-states. They were doing trade with the Ottoman Empire and through them to China, and they were importing a lot of brightly colored fabrics. And they were exporting them to the rest of Europe, and frequently they were painting them as a way to advertise them. Yes, this is why the textiles in Renaissance art can be so incredibly lush. And you will start to see actually some very, very brightly colored Protestant art from England and the Netherlands because they had extensive textile industries and dyeing industries. And these dyeing industries predate the Renaissance because actually one of the things that Henry VII did was he tried to corner the black market on alum, which was a mordant that made dyes more color fast. And so there were a lot of very brightly colored fabrics being produced in those countries. There was also a lot of black dyeing going on. They were importing the dye from the New World through Spain and then dyeing their fabrics. Oh, hush, Pippa. And actually for a while there, the Dutch went absolutely wild for chintz. And chintz is beautiful. I love chintz. It's an Indian fabric. It is brightly colored and also very, very ornately patterned. So absolutely look into that if you want to see some extremely garish, bright, lovely Protestant dress. So if you're going to be doing world building from that time, please keep in mind that the color palette is more complex than you might think, has a lot more to do with local trends and also national trends and who's in power at what time and what dye stuffs are available and what's coming in. Also, if you're having your pre-New World discovery characters wearing a lot of black, please keep in mind that that was not color fast and was a very expensive process. Anyway, lovely to talk to you all today. If you want to know who's barking, it is Miss Pippa. She is my other Maltese and my other baby. And I also have another baby, and he's a poodle, and he's not here right now. His name's Ziggy. Anyway, social media links are in the description below. Editing Anna here because I forgot to say it previously. I'm Anna Fisher. If you got this far and enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe and consider hitting that little notification bell. This is a brand new baby channel, and I would like to see it grow. Anyway, thank you again. I hope you had a lovely day, and if you didn't, I hope it gets better. Bye for now, and I hope to see you in the next one.